Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you guys have had a great weekend. A few days ago, we were talking about how IGN was seemingly attempting to kinda walk back their review on Dragon Age, the Veilguard. And they're not the only corpos doing that. Over at The Gamer, they say Dragon Age, the Veilguard is that friend that's too woke. This is really funny because on November 3rd, they released an article about Dragon Age the Veilguard titled, Dragon Age the Veilguard hit with, quote, anti-woke review bombing. But now they're saying it's too woke, suddenly. And as mentioned, it's been really amusing seeing various outlets and people in general online trying to act like they never actually defended Veilguard all that much. This conveniently occurring after their failed attempts to prop the game up. And as of this moment, Veilguard is very close to hitting that sub 70% rating, which will flick it over to mixed if it does hit below 70%, which it's been steadily trending towards. At this rate, it will go below that. So hopping back over to The Gamer, once again, their article titled Dragon Age the Veilguard is that friend that's too woke. They say, if you're as chronically online as I am, you know the meme. They're referencing this one here, I guess. This is the meme they're referencing, except the one from TikTok. Initially, not their variant of it with Veilguard, but okay. I can't stop thinking about it. Originating from a video skit where a woman refuses to laugh at the Four Seasons Orlando baby because there are worse things happening in the world, the phrase has largely been used as an anti-intellectual cudgel against any kind of remotely sociologically critical social media post. It's used to deem people party poopers for caring about things mostly. Okay, so let's pause there for a second because first of all, there's nothing intellectual about being some virtue signaling weirdo. The journalist going on to say, I much prefer the way it's used by people who declare themselves the friend that's too woke, because I am that friend that's too woke. I think it's intellectually lazy to complain about people having critical thinking and being too woke. It's not critical thinking either, as I just said. It's not intellectual, it's not critical thinking. It's usually very rudimentary surface level thinking from people who are too self-absorbed to see that, but continuing. People, they say, that your words or actions might be offensive. I'm the friend who rolls their eyes when people talk about using ChatGPT to write their emails. The friend who boycotts brands out of solidarity. The friend who corrects people when they misgender someone. People pejoratively call me woke all the time, and I don't consider it a mark of shame. The Veilguard, though, is woke in a bad way. Zero self-awareness from this person. Because it's so terrified of being offensive that it erases everything interesting about Dragon Age. Well, there's definitely truth to Veilguard diminishing Dragon Age. However, I don't believe this journalist is being sincere when they're writing this now. Backtracking on the outlet's prior attempts to prop the game up. They're only trying to save some face now that they completely failed. I find these people to be utterly disingenuous. And that goes for any of these people who are now suddenly critical of Veilguard. What does it mean to be too woke? There's something to be said about people who act entirely out of a fear of being offensive and take themselves so seriously that they scrub all nuance out of their interactions. This is a highly subjective and personal thing, but I feel most accepted for who I am when my friends can joke about my intersectional identities. It's funny when I send a picture of a woman with the caption, "She's so beautiful," to the group chat, and I get a string of replies of just the word gay. It's funny when my partner calls me Nobby, as shorthand for non-binary. It's funny when I talk about being biracial or bisexual and my friends tell me to pick a side. That's the spirit of good comedy. Good, spirited ribbing is an acknowledgement that they see me for what I am, and they're going to lovingly bully me anyway. It's this nuance that separates being socially conscious from being entirely self-serious, and it's that self-seriousness that permeates through the Veilguard and makes it entirely flavorless. The Veilguard only has good guys. As many people, including our own James Troughton, have already complained, every member of the Veilguard gets along too well, even when they really shouldn't. Everybody is nice to each other, and disagreements are smoothed over quickly, if there are any. Everybody is self-sacrificing and noble, and none of them have controversial beliefs. Oh yeah, as you guys already complained about, right? Are you going to mention your articles defending Veilguard, though? Or only trying to be like, oh, see guys, we were critical the whole time, yep. Your rook is just as inoffensive, never saying anything that could step on anyone's toes. Any dialogue you choose is going to be basically the same. Jokey responses are never sarcastic or mean-spirited. Aggressive responses are never hostile, just resolute. You can't pick fights with your companions. You can't even really lose approval with them because of the way the game is designed. It sounds like this person's just repeating stuff that was like upvoted on our Dragon Age after they saw that these opinions were popular and theirs weren't. Another example of this is that James Troughton article that they just referenced a moment ago, because that article came out on November 10th. But once again, on November 3rd, They were trying to act like anyone critical of Veilguard was just an anti-woke review bomber. As I previously mentioned in a video talking about how IGN was suddenly critical of Veilguard 2, I understand that these are different journalists writing these articles. However, these outlets are notoriously disingenuous in my opinion, and even if, hypothetically, the more critical opinions of Veilguard that they're now presenting are genuine, that would only further amplify the point that these people are extremely disingenuous, because it would mean that they purposely withheld these opinions, instead trying to prop the game up and smear the critics. Continuing, they say every faction is scrubbed of flaws. There's already a total lack of interpersonal conflict in the game because these characters are generally totally lacking in negative traits, which not for Tosh, which in turn makes them completely yawn-worthy, but this attitude extends into Dragon Age's copious lore. For example, the Antivin Crows have long been portrayed as a very morally gray faction. They're cutthroat and care only about coin. In Origins, the companion Zevran, my favorite character, can be recruited after he fails to assassinate you. He reveals that the guild is formed largely of child slaves who were bought and then tortured and abused into becoming cold-blooded killers. In the Veilguard, these actions are never acknowledged or discussed. Instead, they're freedom fighters who resist the Antom and protect their city, and only take contracts on people they deem to be evil. This change in morality is never explained, nor does Lucanus ever talk about the abuse he canonically would have faced growing up. Yeah, these devs are nuts, the writers or like whoever's responsible for this stuff. How is it better to like erase the history of these terrible things happening? Oh, you know, it's all good now. We're just not going to talk about all that. Then there's the Lords of Fortune, a group that's very pirate coded. They're treasure hunters who are based on the coast, you know, pirate stuff. We know that they do steal stuff because Dragon Age Tevinter Knights tells us so in Harold Hod the Plan, where the trio of lords attempt a heist. But when Rook jokingly tells Tosh not to steal anything from the lighthouse, Tosh informs them that the Lords of Fortune don't actually steal things. They only take stuff that has no owner. They even go out of their way to return cultural artifacts to their original homes, like some kind of reverse Laura Croft. Any moral ambiguity is entirely erased, when it could have added complexity to Tosh's character. No racism, no problem. Then there's the issue of attitude towards elves, which seem to have been totally ignored. The game's Dalish characters, who are traditionally suspicious of outsiders, seem completely unbothered by their new roles of staving off the end of the world at the hands of their own gods. Where before I'd get called knife ears by random people, barely anyone acknowledges my Rook's race at all. Origins had a very moving section about the conditions of elves in Denerim's alienage, a slum where elves were segregated. And this discrimination has been a major factor in the series' world building. It made me very sad the first time I played it, and it had far more revolutionary message than anything the Veilguard has managed. That racism was interesting. Why was it removed? Worse is the fact that Inquisition ended with elves from all backgrounds joining Solus in his quest. This racial tension would have been the perfect seed for a game that explores the complexities of nationalist/ethnic movements at the principle of self-determination, which could have made for an incredibly interesting game if done well. But in the Veilguard, that's retconned. Solus acted alone, and every elf you meet is in agreement with you. Evernus bad, Rook good, no racial tensions, no disagreements, every character feels and wants the same thing. There are no metaphors here, no complexities, and no nuance. There's a good side and a bad side, and you're always going to be on the good side because all your friends are innately good. Woke in all the wrong ways. Dragon Age the Veilguard is too woke, but not because it lets you be trans or gay, by scrubbing all moral ambiguity from its characters so that every person you meet is uncontroversial and good. It sucks all the dimension out of its characters, turning them all into yes men, who always think you're right. There's so little in this game that could be construed as offensive that Dragon Age's incredibly interesting setting feels like generic fantasy fare, except for the fact that loads of fantasy settings have racism, so it's worse than that. The Veilguard just doesn't have what makes Dragon Age good, and what a waste that is. But wait, I don't understand. I was told that any negative opinions of this game was just anti-woke review bombing. I mean, the gamer had literally said this before. On Metacritic, Dragon Age the Veilguard currently sits at 3.9 out of then. I think they mean 10, but yeah, for user scores against a critic score of 84. Many of these negative user reviews give the game a 0, complaining about quote wokeness unquote and quote DI unquote. This is unfortunately not very surprising. Before release, the Steam discussions page for the Veilguard was flooded by people complaining about wokeness in Dragon Age. And now the very outlet this was written on, the gamer, is also complaining about the quote-unquote wokeness in Dragon Age, now that it's convenient to do so. But you already know my opinion about that, which I've stated all throughout this video. So let me know what you think about these journalists, these corpos, suddenly trying to shift their stance publicly on Veilguard. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this segment, and if you did, consider liking and or subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.